Hello and welcome back to Soul Speak. I'm Meg Michaelson. Thank you so much for being here. Whether it's your first time or you've been here before, I always appreciate it. And I still really feel very touched and even teary sometimes that this matters. So thank you. And please, again, like, share, rate, follow on any of the channels, all of the channels. All of that does mean something. So today I have another special guest who is a friend and a beautiful, soulful woman. Her name is Deb Schaefer, but she has really grown into living this incredible creative life. And as we know, that's not always easy, and it takes great courage. So welcome, Deb. I'm so glad you're here. Deb is what I call a creative and a photographer, and just a beautiful, very generous, kind soul. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Meg. You inspire me. And although I'm nervous to chat with you today, I feel so grateful for your podcast and all the nuggets of wisdom I've heard since you launched last year. Was it last year?
Yeah, it was last July, almost a year. Yeah.
So much wisdom. And I'm going to try to show up and be brave and hope that something that we discussed today will resonate for someone else, a give back.
It absolutely will. And I have been really working with Deb and not begging, because she agreed to get her on the podcast, because I really appreciate her journey. And I really feel you're going to touch a lot of lives with how you've chosen to live. So we'll start by, as you look back at your journey with living a creative, soulful life, because you and your husband have a company that's creative, but that's not necessarily what you're doing outside of that. Was there an event or something that caused you to shift and really embark on living with so much more expansion?
Yeah, I've been reflecting on what that pivotal point was. And I think in 2006, I was having queso and chips and a margarita with my sister-in-law, who I admired so much. She was a photographer. She was super creative. Every time we were together, we made something. We also made a big mess in my mom's house, which is where we usually gathered. But she was really important to me. And as we were enjoying our chips and queso, we were talking about the responsibility of being parents and all the joys and hopes related to being parents. And she was the mother on that day to a 9-month-old baby boy. And I had 2 little girls at the time. And then fast forward to Tuesday, so this was 3 days after that evening together with our margaritas, she passed away. And she was 36 years old. And it was very unexpected. It was very shocking to me. She was one of the first people close to me that I lost, and it was so hard to understand. But over time, I developed an appreciation for photography. Her name was Heather Hart, and she took photos of hearts, mostly in nature. So a cloud in the sky in the shape of a heart, a rock on the ground under her feet, leaves, random M&Ms that come out of the box in the shape of a heart versus the perfect oval. She was always in pursuit of finding hearts. So she taught me that practice. And that was one of the things that helped me navigate grief, was feeling connected to her through that practice. So I was very serious about finding hearts and feeling connected to her. And I also discovered music was really healing to me during that time. There was one specific song that I discovered in a movie soundtrack, and it was called More Time. And it really captured what I felt like I needed with her, was more time. and it was by a band called Need to Breathe. So there were some gifts in that horrible sadness, and I remain close with her son. But that was kind of a pivotal point. So in that journey of finding the hearts, I discovered how I was more joyful and present when I was creative. And fast forward a few years, in 2010, I was kind of restless again. And I discovered a Word of the Year project that Allie Edwards somewhat pioneered. There was probably other artists that also talked about that Word of the Year that sort of replaced the practice of New Year's resolutions. So that year I picked the word breathe. I didn't know what it would mean or where it would lead, but it took me down some interesting pathways. For one, I was training for a marathon. I was going to run the Twin Cities Marathon with some dear friends that year, and I was having trouble getting deep breaths as I ran. And just in general, I was stressed and I just had struggled with breathing. So I decided to pursue yoga, get on my mat more, and focus on breathing. I ended up doing some allergy testing and got some solutions to run better. I did finish a marathon that October that year, but I also went to my first Need to Breathe concert that year. As I mentioned, I discovered them through the pathway of grief and how music healed me in 2006. Well, healing isn't a linear path, so I wasn't healthy after one
Sure.
year.
No,
Took a
no.
long time.
Right.
So that was my year of breathe, and that was a really pivotal year.
And that
I
was
also
2010.
That was
And I want
2010.
to back you up a moment, if that's okay. Because when you go back to after your sister in law passed, and that was in 2006,
Yes.
were you, because you're very creative, you're a very creative soul, were you doing anything prior to that? And then that pushed you? And then what did you start? Did you start photography at that point?
Yes, I was taking photos of all the hearts in nature. So I
Okay.
did pick up my camera. But
Okay.
then in 2010, my husband gave me a DSLR camera, which elevated my ability to pursue photography more seriously.
Okay.
But otherwise, just the creative projects I pursued then were activities with my daughters, making Play-Doh and
Yeah.
all the things kids love as
Yeah.
elementary school students. They needed me a little bit less in 2010. They were getting a little more older. They were getting older and more independent.
Sure.
And I think that's when I was a little more restless and trying to find things I was going to pursue to fill the doting mom
Yeah.
gap.
Yeah. And so then you went to the concert, and this is in 2010, and you have a new camera. And what happened after that?
Well, I dreamed of being able to take my camera to a concert. That didn't happen right away. But I did get more serious about photography. I started taking classes. I, in 2011, did a photo of the day practice where every day I took at least one photo. And I found the photography put me in the present moment like nothing else.
Yeah.
And in the present moment, my mind settled and I wasn't worrying about the future or the past. I wasn't ruminating. I was just present. And that it sort of changed my lens on life.
Yeah. And that takes discipline because, oftentimes people that are creatives, it's said that they're not always disciplined, but to really live creatively requires discipline. So you created a practice. No, you did a photo a year. And
A photo a day
I mean, I'm sorry, a
for
photo a day. And that's that takes an intentional mindset, because you didn't always have time, but you made time, you built it in. And when I work with people that are trying to do something different or become more creative or learn an instrument or whatever, it's, you got to put it in your calendar, because we can make a million excuses, but we have to put it in our calendar, and it's a priority. And you had other things going on in your life, but you made that a priority. I want to switch gears, then we'll go back. But when I met you, you were, I don't know when I first met you, but when I really met you, you were doing a project. It was creative project every day, and you committed for a whole year. And I was so impressed with that. I can't even tell you. I'm like, wow. And you're so humble. You're like, oh no, it's not a big deal. And it is. It's a big deal. And but you're such a lovely, humble being. How did you stumble upon that? And how did those pieces, and you can talk about photography and that, or either, but doing that discipline of something every day, how did that happen? And how did you stick to that?
Well, I guess, yeah, I can be disorganized. So by deciding that I'm going to do it every day, I was making a commitment, sort of a soul contract with myself that I was going to do that. I had some friends suggest maybe I do it Monday through Friday. And I said, no, I just really gotta keep the momentum going. I think if I stop on the weekend, it'll be harder to start on Monday. And some of the projects were small scale. Maybe the way I cut my daughter's toast was a creative act. But we as a family really committed to creativity. And actually, that was in 2012. And
2012.
create was my word of the year.
Lovely.
And my intention was to take all the scraps of paper from my desk, the books on my shelves, and all the rainy day sort of activities I wanted to try, and to make space and time to pursue them. And I also intentionally wanted to write a little book for my daughters that would sort of give them a blueprint of what I was learning about how creative behaviors and activities helped me in endless ways. So that year began, and some days we would make soap in the shape of donuts. We would pour candles in our kitchen. We would try some cooking things, although, full disclosure, I'm not good in the kitchen with cooking. I can make soap and candles, but I'm not very good at cooking. But we made endless amounts of projects together, and sitting side by side with them, elbow to elbow, sort of focusing on what we were creating, helped launch lots of conversations. And I sort of coined a phrase, I probably heard it somewhere, but I would always tell them, creativity heals. And we had a lot of fun. I thought that year, I think on vacations, I might have drove my family crazy, because I would say, like, well, we're going to go find sea glass on the beach today to make a bracelet. But we really stuck with that creative practice that year. And now, fast forwarding to the present, over the weekend, my daughter knitted a sweater for a baby shower she was attending that she gave as a gift. My other daughter just screen printed t-shirts for a whole class at the school where she teaches. And they both say that they remember creativity heals, and they've invited creativity into their own lives.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of them.
Absolutely. And you also get to be proud of you, because you were the one that led this, right? And you gave your daughters permission and guided them to be living a creative life. Because when kids complain, it's easy for us to say, fine, we'll do it tomorrow. But you didn't. you stuck at it. Nope, let's do it. We're going to do it because we committed to this. And I saw some of the projects. I didn't see all the projects, but I saw some of the projects you did. Yeah, and some were lovely and simple, and some were not as, I don't know, I wouldn't say simple, um, but that's a huge deal. And yet it's doable, because if you had less time, like you said, you would creatively cut the toast, because it was a practice. It was a mindfulness practice to stay in creativity. And I want to
Yes.
throw this in because when we live a creative life, we are less stuck in, we feel more free. Answers come easier. We can problem solve faster, because that's the flow energy that oftentimes we block when we're trying to think things out. But we can't always think things out. Sometimes we just have to throw thinking away and let ourselves be led. So when you look at that practice, how has that changed your life, having that commitment to creativity in that year or any year?
Yeah, I think reflecting back, I think now I carry each of my words into my life. So though breathe is not my word of this year, I recently read a book by James Nestor. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, but it was about the title of the book is Breath. So I'm still focusing on that, fast forward all these years.
Yeah.
So I carry each of my words with me. But there's a creative that thread probably woven
Yeah.
into my life now.
And can you explain that process? Because some people understand a word of the year, but some people have never heard of that. So would you explain what that means, and then some of your words that you've chosen and how you infiltrated that into your life? What does that mean?
Yeah, it sounds a little like a slothy way to pursue a year. I'm going to pick one word and see what happens with that. It sounds very simple, but it's sort of just a beacon and almost like a simple mission statement. And then I can make some decisions when I'm faced with choices, like, is it in alignment with that word? One year, my word was joy. And for me, at that time, I sort of felt like joy's something that is a little more trite and reserved for holidays, and that you got to just work hard every day. And if joy comes, that's good, but it wasn't necessarily part of my everyday life. And in that year, I met several people named Joy, which was
Of course.
astonishing. And each of the people named Joy that I met brought some lesson to me about joy,
Yeah.
and sort of changing my perspective on how I stepped into my day.
Yeah.
If I stepped into my day with a more joyful approach, I found it boomeranged back to me.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot about joy that year.
Yeah. And piggybacking on that, joy is something we can choose to allow in, right? We can hold it out, and we can let it in. And when you have that mindfulness practice of letting it in, my word this year is love, letting more love start my day, and my day, throughout my day, and having that word practice. Yes, it is. Sounds like trite, but it's not. It's more than a word. It's a way to live. What is your word this year?
This year, my word is dream.
Dream.
But I've had a dream for a long time to lead a retreat. And in a month, I'm leading some photographers, and we're going to Iceland together. So I'm excited to see where that dream takes me. I've been analyzing and journaling about the dreams I have at night. and working on putting more of my dreams down on paper, putting them around my desk and in other places that I frequent to remind me of what they are. Last year, my word was manifest, and very similar to dream, I guess. But I found it really powerful in creating a kind of a blueprint of things I hope to achieve last year.
So, say with manifest, how do you give us some examples of how you would then bring that into your daily life?
Well, I've always been passionate about music, and I was very interested in figuring out how to get a pass to bring my camera so I could use my camera in a setting that really excited me, to see if like the joy that I feel when I'm shooting, specifically if I could shoot at a concert, if I could translate that into the art of the images to honor the musicians that have given me so much through their melodies and lyrics. And that was something I was trying to manifest last year. And like one of my goals was to photograph something at Red Rocks, the iconic venue in Colorado. And last July, I did get to photograph someone on the Red Rocks stage, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
And I had some other opportunities last year. So I really found something that I'm really excited and finding a lot of joy in.
That's great. And so when you choose the word manifest, you're connecting with the higher power, the universe, your higher self, whatever you name, and then you take the action steps you need to manifest.
Yeah, and I was probably sending brave emails.
Yes.
And if manifest wasn't my word of the year, I don't know if I would have hit send on those. I was asking more questions, asking for some favors, doing more research.
Which is beautiful because you ignited that within you and then you stick to it. That's the beauty of having a word of the year or a vision board, or as you put things around your house in multiple spots, because we can either talk negatively to ourselves and feel hopeless, or we can put these things up there and be triggered to move forward in ways that delight us, in ways that help us feel great. And that's what you've chosen for quite a few years. And like you said, it's not linear because we don't live linear. Time, this human time thing that we've got going is really not real anyway. It's where we live in nonlinear time in so many ways. So that's just beautiful that you allow yourself to understand that and know healing is a journey. Healing is like this. Because there's always nooks and crannies that we're now being exposed to. When you look back at your time with your daughters, sitting at the table, elbow to elbow, getting that time together, oftentimes we don't have enough time for our kids, we'll say, or we're too busy, or they're too busy. And it can be simple things. How has your communication and relationships changed since you have shifted into living a more creative and soulful life?
Well, I think it's a bridge to talk about things that we have in common versus things that divide us. And I think for me, looking through the lens all the time has changed how I observe. And I feel like I'm more grateful, and I'm learning to be braver in my communication. Exhibit A being here today, but trying to really see someone's perspective, try to connect with them through laughter. Sort of like, I don't know, I think of it kind of a 3-step practice where you observe, ponder, or step into wonder, and then gratitude. There's a Wayne Dyer quote from years ago that invited people to, as he said, Give yourself 5 minutes of contemplation in awe of everything you see around you. Go outside, turn your attention to the many miracles surrounding you. This 5 minute a day practice or regimen of appreciation and gratitude will help focus your life in awe. And I've been trying to use that, but also like with people that I meet, and try to strike up a conversation about what connects us and instead of what divides us.
That's beautiful. And I love the work of Wayne Dyer, and when he says finding that the appreciation, your photography, that has shifted that within you. So when you are, because Deb did my photo shoot for the pictures on my podcast, and we're going to do another one soon, updated, because I'm older now than I was last year. And when you look at how you have grown and shifted, even through photography, how does that shifted your outlook on life and your outlook in general on yourself and your connection to yourself and maybe your connection to joy or wonder?
Well, for one thing, I know I wake up earlier and I'm always so excited to work on my retreat in Iceland or look at the concert photos I shot last night if I didn't already download them the night before. I am so excited and joyful, but I still have a lot of responsibilities and things that interfere with my happy dance. But I'm very excited, especially in the morning. I'm always so excited to get up and who knew that at this age and this stage of life, you could feel the joy like a kindergartner.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe even more joy now than you had 20 years ago.
Absolutely. Who
Yeah.
knew?
Who
One of
knew?
my phrases I tell my friends a lot after a fun experience, I always say, who knew we could have so much fun?
That's right. Who knew we could have so much fun? And you had said something when we talked earlier about it's never too late. You're never too old. And I'd love to have you expound on that because it's true. We hear people say, oh my gosh, I can't start that now. And now
And I
you're
say,
leading a retreat.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I firmly believe it's never too late. And you probably have everyone has gifts and gems inside of them to share. And I love stories about artists that don't pick up a paintbrush till they're 60 years old and they go on to make prolific work.
Absolutely.
Or scientists that start research at age 80.
Yeah. And you know this because we've talked about this too. Those people that aren't doing it, they have that urge or they don't even know what the urge is. And their energy goes down and they struggle with not as much happiness or not as much self-confidence. It doesn't just, our desires don't just go away. We just bury them and then they become more of a dead weight that weighs us down. Yeah. So even if we wait until our deathbed and then we decide to be creative, it's way better than not doing it because there's always times to shift.
Tiny steps can create big action. So even a 1 minute a day practice can be a breadcrumb pathway that leads to surprising outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. Look at the journey when you were doing a creative project every day for 365. And now your daughters are living that way. And that was because you stuck with it. And there were tiny, tiny practices and bigger ones. Can you tell us a few of those? Because some people are going to want to start that process. They're going to commit to, some of the listeners are going to commit to a creative project for 365 days. So, can you give us some examples of some of the things you did?
Sure. Well, sometimes obviously I worked with my camera, and other days we baked cupcakes and made a rainbow pattern inside the cupcakes. Some days I remember one day we drove the car over some spoons to flatten the spoon, and we used metal engraving letters to write words on the flattened spoons.
Cool.
Silliness, but it was
Wow,
fun.
cool. Yeah. How'd you get your ideas?
Well, at the time we would watch, there was a TV show the girls watched called Creative Juice. We would watch that, and that would inspire some
Cool.
of our activities.
Yeah. Yeah.
We would make soap with toys inside and give them away. We also did a lot of like picking up sticks and making a crown. We spent time perfecting bubble recipes to make giant bubbles. And I was on a pursuit to make a bubble that would freeze in our sub-zero winters here in Wisconsin. So I could take pretty photos of frozen bubbles and the patterns that emerge
So
once they freeze. I was kind of looking for a bubble to make a heart for me.
Oh,
I'm
so
always looking for signs.
yeah. That's so cool. There's a million ways to be creative. And then when you adopt, I'm a painter. Part of what I do is paint. And someone said to me, because I like to look at other people's paintings, and then sometimes I'll take a painting and make it my own. And someone said, but that's not really, that's cheating. Like, well, no, it's not. That's, the world is that way. Like, it's no different than looking at a tree and painting the tree. We are inspired by other people's creative talents. And so if you're going to embark on a journey like Deb has with the project every day, it doesn't have to be all unique ideas that you come up with. You can get inspired by other people and do that. And even photography. You led this beautiful journey of photography of hearts, and that got you going. And that was adopted from your sister-in-law. So it's beautiful. That's how we get to piggyback on each other. That's how we get to inspire each other. And join in the forces, you guys, and find people that want to. You could create a creative group of people that want to live a more creative life. You don't have to do it alone.
I just want people to follow their curiosity and see what's been on their rainy day bucket list of something they want to try. And I hope someone tries something new, and then that leads to the next step, which leads to the next step. And pretty soon they discover that pattern of how much joy can be discovered.
Thank you so much. You have such a gift. And as I said, you're just a lovely being. So I appreciate you being on here. And I know it's uncomfortable. I was scared to death the first time I came on. And yet you did it. Just like you're living your life. You're not letting fear stop you. You have the fear, you do it anyway. And that's what causes us to feel like we're really living.
One book suggestion for you, if your word is love. Have you read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl?
Yes, just this last year I read it. And tell me why.
I just love that book. And when you said that was your word, I felt compelled to share that. And I just loved how he was able to find joy in horrible circumstances and beauty, and see beauty and appreciate beauty despite his circumstances, and that his joy spread. I won't say too much about the book, but it's such a powerful
Yeah.
book.
And it is an old book, you guys. This is an old book. And it is so, someone had recommended it to me. And it's such a beautiful book. And his main theme in it is having freedom. Freedom is a state of mind. So when Deb's journey through becoming such a beautiful, creative being, that was choices. She gave herself the freedom to do that. But freedom is something we can attain. Freedom's never taken from us. And I've talked about this in a different podcast. I actually talked about that book in another podcast, because it's if we can allow ourselves to feel free, okay, I'm afraid, but I'm going to do it anyway. The freedom becomes in our minds. We understand it's a choice. Freedom is a choice in our mind, and no one can take that away from us. No one can make us think anything. That's up to us. And that's the difference between how Deb has lived. It's choosing to change her mindset.
Trying. Always trying.
Yeah.
Some days are better than others.
Right. Always trying. Yeah, my word is love. And that doesn't mean 24/7 I'm expounding love. Sometimes I get cranky. Then I remind myself, oh yeah, because we're human. And that's the beautiful part of this journey. It is not linear. We learn something and it takes us a while to develop that new practice. And then if we get it right 80% of the time or 70% of the time, we're doing pretty darn good. So thank you. And I look forward to seeing more of your work. Do you want to shout out your website?
Yes, I have two websites. One is debschaefer.com and the other is Deb Schaefer Live Music, where I've segmented the concert photography piece of my work.
Yeah, and then she's got some really beautiful work. So check it out, because it will inspire you. Will inspire you. Listeners, thank you so much for being here. We are always grateful. And we wish you a beautiful, beautiful week. See you next time. Hey, listeners, thank you so much for being part of the Soul Speak world. I really appreciate that. And if you're willing, and if you find this of value, would you please follow on any of the platforms you're listening to, whether that's Apple or Spotify or Google or any of the platforms. And of course, I love the ratings if you find this valuable. You can also follow me on YouTube and like and share. And all of that really makes a difference. Appreciate your participation. And of course, I really appreciate you being part of this world.